Jesse, welcome to Mania Melancholy. But we were just talking about the podcast, and like, because I'm the same way with you. Like, I can't, if I'm doing a mundane task, I need something else to like stimulate my brain. And there's such a passive, easy thing to engage in. And there's always like, especially when you have, I love when you get like different interviewers. Like, Joe's obviously my favorite for a myriad of reasons. But then you have different people where you get to see through their lens with this person, and you have people like Andrew Huberman, who's just almost, I mean, like an encyclopedia of knowledge. And there's always something more you can learn. I think especially after COVID, when, the medical system succeeded in such a spectacular fashion.
It was a nightmare, man. And my sister is a doctor, and I won't say her name or where she works, but man, she was absolutely fuming. She described to me and my mom's a nurse also, so she was working in a hospital, and they were just describing to me the atmosphere that it was to work in during that time, and it was pins and needles, trying to tell parents that maybe it's a good idea to look further into the technology that you're just injecting into your children. And even you should maybe do a little bit more information before you just, stab yourself with that also. And they lied about everything. So
it was so blatant. And for me, I mean, I don't want to get too big, but I'll give you kind of my backstory. So I was always like a super dorky kid in high school, addicted to video games. But when I got to see you in 2018, I started for the first time to like have friend groups and develop like actual, growing up, having adult skills, having those social skills and friends that I never had. And I loved Boulder, was over the moon with it, loved it. And then COVID hit, and because I lived in Bear Creek, which was this international dorm, all my friends were from all around the world, and they went home. So I lost all my friends, and I describe it as like Boulder was like a paradise, and it became my prison. And it was fine for like, I think 2020, when things were crazy and people were figuring out, I was like, okay, I get it. This is a tough situation. But when 2021 rolled around, and I'm like, why are you locking down young people? They're not getting sick from this illness. And this is the time in your life when it's really important for you to develop. Your friends are your family at that point in your life, and you're just going to yank it away. I mean, it took me I'm only now just getting to the point where I could recover from like being alone for that long, especially as guys, when you're fucking angry and you're full of testosterone and you don't really know how to handle it. I mean, I think everyone went through all this shit. And the biggest thing, frustration with me, and I know it's kind of silly, but I was frustrated that like the institutions that shut everything down, they didn't acknowledge what they were doing. I would have had a much easier job if they were like, hey, we understand this is so difficult. We can't imagine the pain people are going through right now, but this is the situation. We have to do this. We are sorry. Like a simple apology for like what happened would have like made it so much easier to at least know that you screwed it up. But they wanted to treat it, like you said, like everything was fine. When I think it was Brett Weinstein said, if you did the exact opposite of what they said, you would have done better, which means it's not
exactly what I did.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was, it was a massive, I'm trying to think of the word for it, where, it's just a massive gaslighting, and it was incredible that they played this like holier than thou card on you and made you feel like there was talk of taking away religious exemption at CU for getting the vaccine.
Thank God they didn't, because I claimed religious exemption to not get.
Yeah, it was absolutely insane. And then, they took away concealed carry right from veterans on campus.
They did?
Yeah. And you're worried about school shootings, and you take away guns from the people who can actually
who know how to use them,
who know combat, who know what's going on. There's things that the leadership does at that school that I don't understand, and it seems like they are catering to some small but loud audience rather than the vast majority of students who probably fall somewhere in the middle.
Exactly.
Any political, religious, any leaning that you can come to think about. Most people fall in the middle. Most people are good people just trying to, learn something, do something, and then hopefully add something to the world. And you're not fostering an environment where that is
You're doing the exact opposite.
Exactly. You're limiting it, and
you're putting people against each other for, like you said, when most people agree on these basic set of values. And on a bright side, it was how I got. One of the reasons I really fell in love with Joe Rogan was because during that time, the only like social contact I really had was like listening to his podcast, which was like, okay, I may not be there, but I can see there's still people talking. And in this space, you had people like Brett Weinstein or Stein. It was Brett Weinstein. It's always like a weird like ending. And they like, I remember listening to like Brett and Heather, and they'd say like, get outside. Simple things. And I remember listening to people like Dr. Robert Malone, a lot of these doctors who were saying like simple things like that anyone who took a basic epidemiological course would know, like, you don't vaccinate in the middle of a pandemic because you're going to make variants. Like, and that's not like some wild off view. It's literally like in a 101 class.
You and I are both college educated men, right? Neither of us ever took a class in virology or epidemiology, right?
Yeah.
But I can listen to a literal expert who has something like 8 or 9 patents on the mRNA vaccine technology.
He owns it. He owns the technology. Can you imagine if like Ford, who made the car, was like, yeah, don't never
drive it.
Yeah, don't drive it.
But then Chevrolet and every other car company is like, you need to drive Ford, actually, because Ford is really where it's at. Okay. Or I'm sorry, if the government was telling you you're going to drive a Ford and you're going to like it, and you're like, well, now I don't know if I want to drive a Ford. I'm sorry.
It's such it was so interesting how there were some people who you could tell, like, I've been very sensitive to like authority. I'm not very good with being told what to do unless I trust the person. If I trust you, like, I'll go to the end of the earth. Are you familiar with the Big Five personality model at all, like Ocean?
So is that the like ENFJ kind of stuff?
It's similar. It's basically there's 5 dimensions. It's like introversion, extroversion on like a normal distribution, openness to experience, neuroticism, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. And agreeableness is kind of like is a dimension, and it breaks down into like politeness and compassion. Each of the aspects have 2 sub aspects.
Sure.
And agreeableness, like the most disagreeable people are all in prison. But an interesting thing about it is I'm very low in politeness, which is basically like differential to authority. And most comedians are very low in politeness, which is kind of funny. And it's not like a lot of people think, oh, you don't listen to anyone. It's actually not so. It's just that people who are really low like that are very skeptical of authority. But when they find someone they trust, it's great. And I was someone who, when I was like, if you tell me what to do, I'm going to like, okay, why? And if you don't give me an answer, I'm going to tell you fuck off, because like, I'm not, especially after every egregious offense. And then like what I haven't liked in the last couple years is when I've had skepticism in some circles of what's happened. They're like, why are you like this? And I'm like, I'm going to paint a picture for you. If I was in pretend it's not an institution, it's like a person, and you fucked me over catastrophically, any normal person would say you'd be a fool to just go in and trust you without at least an apology and acknowledgement of what happened and an admission that you'll try to do better. But they're like, no, you should just trust me. It's like, no, this is just a basic type of thing. And I think some people, and not even on a big sense, struggle to kind of have, the world's a crazy place. And I think some people are comfortable taking more on that for themselves. And some people really want that authority. I mean, where do you feel like you fall on that? I don't want to hog up what I'm talking about.
No, you're good, man. I like listening too. So it's tough to say. I had to give a little bit of my background. So I grew up in Jersey with a cop for a dad. And I lived through like 9/11, but I was about 5 years old, so I don't really remember much of the day. But I think it was probably a similar thing. Maybe not to the the same shock value. But COVID was probably like a little similar to how the government responded to 9/11, where like they pass laws and they try to, enact things to like limit your freedom, and rob you of liberty. And I also served in the military after high school, so I saw how the government works up close. And
do you mind if you go in a little bit to your background in the military?
I was in the Navy. I tried to be a Navy SEAL, and then I unfortunately got medically disenrolled from training in first phase for cerebral hemorrhage. And then I spent about a year on like light duty, maybe like 9-10 months, working in the Buds Medical Facility, which was really cool. They showed me how to, do IVs and administer flu shots and vaccines and stuff like that.
So you're doing that for like the people in Buds training?
Yeah. So when guys would come in, when they would have, hypothermia or a heat stroke or something like that, how to treat those types of like casualties. And then, guys would come in for need a blood draw or need saline or something like that, especially if they had a heat stroke. They're massively dehydrated, so you got to like get them fluids. So we would do things like that and help out. And there was a guy there, Chief Franklin. Shout out Chief Franklin. He was looking out for a few of us. So there was a couple of guys there that were there in classes before me that like all walks of life. Really, I've had some unique experiences to be around like very high caliber individuals. And
that's so cool.
Yeah, it forged me into the man I am today for sure, in large part. And I got to see both like the amazing side of how the government operates when it comes to things like Navy SEALs and stuff. I have a lot of friends who are Navy SEALs and at like the highest level of the SEAL teams, which is really incredible. And they are the most incredible men I've ever had the privilege of like being around, calling friends. And
is there just an air like I've got obsessed with like special forces guys, and I mean, can you from what there's almost like it's there and it's not, just how they carry themselves.
So there's something, like you had to learn. I can't, I got to admit that I don't remember it to this day, but the Navy SEAL ethos, and it's like an embodiment. It's a statement, and an embodiment of what a Navy SEAL is. And I can't speak from experience, but I can speak from knowing guys closely that they are confident but humble men, and they are the dudes you want on your team for sure. They are great fathers and husbands. They're good dudes. They're humans like anyone. They have their own faults and their own blemishes. And, I think to them sometimes when you're the hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And I more so want to use them like a scalpel. I don't want them to be in Palestine or Israel fighting someone else's war. I don't think that's fair. I appreciate that they're there to do a hard job, so I don't bat an eye at it. But I shouldn't say that. I disagree sometimes with the way things are run. I'm not a – well, let me delve into that a little further, because this comes from my experience in the military, where I saw young men and middle-aged men like have to operate in a way where like sometimes the middle-aged man who has just been in the Navy for 17 years barely got a GED, and that's not to knock him, but like, then he's in charge of a guy who's below him, who's only been in the Navy for 2 years, but he's a 28-year-old dude who is like the Dos Equis man. He's like the most interesting man in the fucking world. He's been a professional boxer in Russia. He's got masters in Russian and music, and he taught himself 6 languages that he speaks fluently. Like he's an incredible dude. He's got to answer to this guy, and this guy's like calling him a piece of shit and stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is what bureaucracy looks like up close. Like nothing gets fucking done. Everything's hurry up and wait, and it's fucking idiots that tell the smart people what to do because of the chain of command shit.
That's so interesting. What you're saying, because I can tell like you. I want to go. There's so much here, but what I've noticed from what you've said is, like you said, I love what you said about the Navy SEALs is that they're human.
Yes,
they're amazing people, but they're human. And then you have this amazing ethos,
incredible humans nonetheless,
and incredible exactly. And then there's this mesh with bureaucracy that they kind of it's kind of like that marriage that is not happy, but you kind of have to do it because you need
go through the motions.
Exactly, and I think. what you said with that example where you have this young, very almost enlightened person who has had a big worldview. And I think when you have, not to knock the guy who's been there for 17 years GED, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think, when you get older, you kind of get set in your ways. You're not as open to, maybe new ideas. And then when you see someone who maybe had a different path than you and I bet a lot of times also you just get personal ego and emotions into that. And you're like, I don't want to let this person have these ideas because it makes me feel insecure about who I am. And then you have that on a mass scale and, bureaucracies are how so many empires have fallen apart. But there's still like that interesting mishmash of like, the people there are still awesome, but they're in this system that is like rough to figure out. Am I on the right track, or do you say?
And one thing that I'll say is that I got to see. So while I was in, I never deployed anywhere. I was only in for 2.5 years. Unfortunately, I had a cerebral hemorrhage the first time at Buds, and then about a year later, when I went to dive school, I had a seizure at like 30 feet underwater, and they said, yeah, you're going home, bud. You can't stay at the sleepover anymore. So
you had a seizure 30 feet underwater?
Yeah, apparently I needed to be resuscitated on a pool deck. Apparently it took about 7 guys to hold Jesse Mack down. I got strength like a motherfucker. But I then spent like the last 10 months or so in the military in a med board review process with the VA to determine like disability ratings and all this kind of shit. And it was in between those times, I was stationed at one base in Great Lakes, Illinois, and I was stationed there twice, both for about maybe like 6 months in total. But I got to see how that base is run. Then I went to the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California.
Okay.
I got to see how that base is fucking run. And then I went to the Naval Dive and Salvage Training Center in Panama City Beach, Florida. And I got to see how that base was run. The juxtaposition between those three is absolutely wild. And at the first one is where you see, like, the one in Great Lakes. It's where boot camp is and everything like that.
Great Lakes, so is this in
Illinois?
Illinois.
Yeah, it's about maybe like 45 minutes to an hour north of Chicago in a place called Waukegan. And I think it sits on Lake Michigan, maybe Lake Superior, I forget. I don't know the Great Lakes that well. But that is where you see, like, the brainwashing take place. And it's fucking insane to see.
So you mean, like, when you say brainwashing, like, what do you mean? What context? Like recruits
just
coming
in? Taking young kids, usually between 18 and 22 years of age, 23 years of age, maybe something like that, who are malleable still, and just molding them into what you need them to be, which is like a lethal fighting force at sea. But it is absolutely disgraceful. Like, some of the people that are there. I mean, like, remediation for, like, where you can't pass boot camp because you can't swim. And it's like, what has the population become? Like, and we're a volunteer force, so it's kind of insane.
So you mean like the recruits are disgraceful, coming and can't swim?
Yeah, I can't remember where some podcast that I heard the statistic on recently, but it's something like 40 to 50% of young men are ineligible for, like, the draft due to medical and mental health reasons. Yeah, that is egregious.
Yeah, I know I'm not. I don't know if you ever have you ever heard of Brothers at War?
Can't say.
It's so I have a big family, and bipolar runs in our family. I have it, and one of my cousins was supposed to go off and he was like the oldest grandson, supposed to go to be deployed, and he was diagnosed with bipolar when he was 18, and he was unable to, and so my two older brothers went. One of them went to West Point, the other was just enlisted, and then rose really high to be a high-level sniper in the military. But it is interesting to be like, one of the reasons I got into working out was because I was not being able to know that I would be able to be drafted. And I do agree with, like, for people with bipolar, like, they shouldn't be in the military. I have, like, a picture of, like, you're under fire and they're like, get John's meds out, and just, like, throwing shit over there. I mean, it doesn't work. But one of the reasons I got into working out was because I was like, well, maybe mentally it's not my place, but physically and if possible mentally, I want to get to a place where I can be that. You can't refuse me because of that. And it is baffling to see Colorado is a pretty fit state, so I don't think it's a great example, but I remember when I went down to live in Texas, and you see some people where like everyone you see is massively overweight.
Brother, I grew up 35 minutes outside New York City, and let me tell you, there's some hefty folks around North Jersey and New York City, and I don't blame them. I mean, the Italian food is delicious, but yeah, it's there's three things that I think it took me a long time, longer than it should have, to figure these three things out. But sleep, diet, and exercise. Like, I think it was Henry Rollins. I think he was the lead singer of Black Flag. Wrote not an essay, not a poem, but like a short,
Piece.
blurb, yeah, on iron and the soul, and like just how like 200 pounds is always 200 fucking pounds, man. Like the weights kick it to you real. And man, I have found no better, just kind of steal his phrasing here, but like found no better antidepressant than fucking kicking a heavy bag for 45 minutes, man. I can't walk out of there and not have a smile on my face.
Dude,
Like, it's fucking impossible.
I have a garage out there with I wish I could have it's not quite a heavy bag, but it's a kicking bag, because I'm with you. As a person with so bipolar is treatment-resistant depression. You can't give them the normal SSRIs, but even if you could, I don't think I'd take them. The thing that got me out of my depression was, or kept me alive, was working out.
Yes.
Nothing is better than going through it. I'm a huge, during COVID, I was so depressed that I remember. I can't describe bipolar depression. It is like a void, and it sucks because there's literally nothing they can do. And I think sometimes, I get why some people don't like Goggins. It's just not their cup of tea. Fair enough. But what like the university, because I was, during COVID, I was working out twice a day for 45 minutes. I was getting 8 hours, 9 hours of sleep every night. I was getting straight A's, doing 12 hours of homework a day. I was doing everything right, and I was still wanting to kill myself like every day for 9 months. And I remember going to like the university psychologist, because I've had the same psychiatrist for 23 years, and I was seeing him twice a week. And they're like, "We want you to see this person," and I'm like, "I'll go." And I tell them what happened, and they're like, "We don't know what to do with you." And I'm like, "I know, because I'm doing everything." And at that time, a lot of people wanted that like compassion, like, "Oh, you're great, you're this, you're that." Maybe it works for some people, but when you're that depressed, like, that doesn't work. What worked for me was hearing David Goggins saying, "This sucks." Yeah, it's supposed to suck. It's going to suck. You got to get out there and face it nonetheless. Yeah. And that kind of like, it is kind of a shoehorned in, just going. I mean, I remember it was one day it was like negative 17 degrees with like 3 feet of snow on the ground, and I was out there running, because that mentality, and hearing it from someone like David Goggins, who I don't know if you've read his book, but his life is just like, oh my God. And seeing like, oh, if he came from that and is still doing this, I can do that too. And sometimes that, being told you're being a bitch, you are, some of this suffering is on you. It's not like the fault of the world. Was so helpful.
Yeah, and what's his face is real good for that too. Jordan Peterson was real good for that too. 12 Rules for Life was helpful. I got to see him live here in Denver. Went to one of his lectures, and brilliant. Yeah. Was this in April of last year? No, this was going back now, probably 2 or 3 years ago. At the Ball Arena, I believe.
Yeah. I went to one this year, and then one the year before. They were fucking great.
Yeah, man. And everyone's dressed to the nines, like in suits and tie, and I was not about to be caught out of a suit and tie.
What I was also surprised was the diversity of people who were there. Like,
it was amazing to see a lot of women in the crowd and stuff like that.
Exactly. I was like, I thought it was just going to be a bunch of sausage fest things, but it was like all sorts of ages, ranges. It was really cool. Yeah. Anyway, to get back to, I love this military story. Yeah. So you were at the Great
Lakes. So that was boot camp, and then they were doing this at the time. I don't know if they do this anymore, but I went to something called Bud's Prep, and so it was like another 8 weeks that you spent in Great Lakes with SEAL and SWCC instructors. SWCC is a special warfare combatant craft crewman. So like people that operate fast boats and big guns, and help extract and drop off SEALs. And then SEALs often joke that they're like the delivery team. But so that was a little bit more of a wake up. You know, these are guys that have actually like seen combat and stuff. You know, they were in Iraq and Afghanistan. Whether or not you agree with why we were there, and I don't, but you know, they were there, and they answered their call, and they're tough men. They're, you know, you see it immediately, man. Like it's like just the way they carry themselves is such a different aura than the, you know, we call it like big Navy, and then there's like little Navy. And like big Navy is like the regular Navy. It's the people that are on the boats and the submarines doing the regular jobs. Then there's two branches of special operations within the Navy, and it's Naval Special Warfare, which are SEALs and SWCC. They're people that actually like will see combat. And then there's Special Operations, which is the Explosive Ordnance Disposal, or EOD, Navy divers, and I think it's air rescue, if I'm not mistaken.
So is it just separate organizations doing separate things?
They both fall under the umbrella of like Naval Special Warfare / Special Operations, and EOD will also see combat. You know, they'll be attached usually to a SEAL team, and then like go out with them on missions, and they handle like bomb disposal kind of stuff, like hurt locker shit, and so I'm getting into the weeds a little bit on that stuff, but that being said, is that so SEAL and SWCC go to Coronado and that's at Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California, and that is where BUDS takes place, and I forget what the selection process is called for SWCC, but that's where that takes place. And then BUDS is like the famous like 6-month, you know, SEAL training, where it's like conditioning is the first phase, then the dive phase, then the land warfare. Hell Week and all that shit is in first phase. I did not make it to Hell Week, unfortunately, but
you didn't make it to the Hell Week?
No, unfortunately, I went early.
One thing I want to notice about you, what I respect a lot, which I love, is I kind of have I notice a similar thing when, like, you know, people know I do martial arts in the comedy scene, and people are like, oh, you're a fighter, and I'm like, no, I'm a martial artist, because there is a guy in this comedy scene who's on the podcast who is a fighter, and there's a difference. And I love that you're
doing a thing versus
like, and it's also like when you're a fighter, you're getting in the ring and you're putting your body and your soul on the line.
I've been a fighter at one time. I am no longer. You know, now I'm just a martial artist.
Exactly, and there's not like that. I don't think it demeans. Like, I love being a martial artist because I can be a martial artist till I'm 95. I
proved everything I needed to prove to myself. I'm good.
Yeah.
I got in there. I can throw my hat in the ring with many people. But
I do love this is one of the things, like the respect I can tell you have for these people is that and this is, I notice you're like, I did this but I didn't do this, and I love that, because I can tell in your voice it's not something that's like an insecurity about yourself.
No, and it hurts, you know, it hurt in the past much more, I got to be honest, you know, especially you know, I went when I was young, 20 years old. You know, half of me wishes that like I went later in life. Maybe around like 23, 24, a little more mature, a little bit more of a head on my shoulders.
How do you think that would have changed things?
Just a little more physically and mentally prepared. You know, it was, I didn't quit by any means, but, you know, I never had to put my helmet on the grinder, which was sweet. That's my one, you know, claim to fame, I guess. But it was also just that, you know, I did everything that, you know, you see on the like documentaries and shit. I did the boats on the heads. I did the O course. I did the 4-mile timed runs, the 2-mile ocean swims, and the surf tortures. And like, yeah, all right, I can do some shit, and I can, you know, not give in. But just a little more like preparation and shit. You know, I kind of went into it assuming that I would just become a fucking beast while I was there, rather than going in as a beast. You know, and it wasn't that I was in bad shape and like not up to par. You know, I could pass all the physical tests, but I should have been able to like blow them out of the water. And, you know, it's not without, like, retrospective that I come to that conclusion. And, like, you know, people could have told me that beforehand. And this is, you know, one of the lessons I had to learn, basically, was learn from people rather than making the mistake yourself. Like, if other people have made the mistake, then take them at their word, especially if they're, like, a high-operating individual. They probably got some shit together, so maybe you could fucking take a page out of their book because you don't have everything
figured out. So you sounds like you were a 20-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. My dad used to... Dude, my dad has me pinned, man. Like, he calls me Jesse, I know, McMullan. I just, everything. I know. And, now I got to realize, wow, I don't know. And it was martial arts, honestly, that really, it really woke me up to humility. in a way that I hadn't. I don't want to say I was like fake humble, but I definitely had a little bit too much of a chip on my shoulder at a younger age, and it wasn't until martial arts when I started getting my ass beat by people I thought I could, I'd see on the street, and I'd be like, I could fucking beat that dude's ass. Like, I don't know shit.
Why do you think? Because you said I mean, like you said what you went through. I mean, all the crazy shit you hear about, and all these Navy SEAL documentaries and these books, and yet that didn't give you that humility, that I don't know, ego death may not be the right word, that martial arts did. How did martial arts do that when all that crazy hard shit didn't?
Man, I think it was probably a little bit of the context surrounding why I got into martial arts, which I haven't talked about too much, but I am unfortunately a felon. I made a bad mistake when I was young, and I waved a gun at people while driving that were, I thought they were driving like assholes, and I unfortunately made a bad mistake. I'm not asking to own a weapon or anything like that, but it's that Florida is also a shitty state to get caught with gun shit in, and thankfully I didn't do jail time, but I was facing 5 years in a Florida State penitentiary, and I was like, well, I better learn how to fucking defend myself, and I went to
Oh wow.
a Muay Thai class like 3 days after I think it was my 23rd birthday. I said, God, if you are up there and you're listening, please, I will fucking do this every day for the rest of my life if you give me the opportunity to. And thankfully I got away with just doing like probation for a few years. I was on my fucking P's and Q's, still am, but it put a lot of shit into perspective for me that damn, dude, I'm about to get in there with fucking animals. And like, I had so when I was first in jail, we all got like ushered into a room the next morning to see a judge via fucking Skype. And, you're like being told what your bail is set at and being told like what you're being charged with. And there was a guy in there that was laughing at like his bail being set at something like $3 million because he called in a bomb threat on the local mall. And I'm looking at this guy, and he's got SS tattoos and swastikas on his eyelids and shit, and fucking 88s everywhere. And I was just like, dude, is this what I'm going to have to fucking become? Like, is this what I have to do to fucking survive this? And by the grace of God, I somehow made it out of that. But, I was like, all right, I should really fucking try and find my way in this world. And that was when I really started taking school seriously. I was studying physics, but I wasn't really invested in it too heavily. I was getting fucking high all the time. I was drinking all the time, and I wasn't really absorbing any of the shit. And I just kind of thought I could just walk through it, and I don't care. I'll get a C, and I'll just be done. And it took a lot of like self-reflection to be like, dude, do you want to do this or not? Because this is really fucking hard. You're gonna have to know shit like calculus. I came back to school after not taking math for like 4 or 5 years, and I'm taking pre-calc, and I'm like, I don't know what the fuck x squared is, man. Like, what the fuck are we talking about? Graphs and shit. And
You mean a parabola?
brother, dude, I was fucking lost in the sauce. And I barely passed pre-calc with a C minus, barely passed calc 1 with a fucking C minus by the skin of my nuts. And then finally, COVID actually hit. I got to go home and like finish physics 1 from home after failing it the first time. And then I retook physics 1, and I was taking the final in my own house, and I was like, I think I got like a B on it or something like that. And I wound up passing with like a B minus, and I was like, all right, I think I am capable of doing this shit. I should really just invest the time. So I went back, and I like spent the first 6 weeks of lockdown in like that summer reteaching myself like trigonometry and shit like that, and going through algebra stuff because I just didn't remember shit. Math is a tool that if you don't use it, you lose it. And then that summer I took Calc 2. And I wound up doing much better and getting like a B minus in Calc 2. And I was like, all right, dude, maybe math's pretty fucking cool too. And then I started listening to fucking, Eric Weinstein and shit like that. And I'm like, damn, maybe this really is what I should fucking go into. I think it's fascinating. I was always obsessed with like space and space documentaries, black holes. All that kind
really?
of shit. Like, I would get high when I was in high school, and I would just fucking veg and watch these like space documentaries on the cosmos, and I would just be blown away. And I was just like, kind of enthralled by the infinity of it all. And I was like, damn, if I can do this, I would really like to know more about this shit. Like, this past semester, I just finally passed a class that took me 4 or 5 tries to pass, but partial differential equations.
Oh, really?
And
Oh.
it is just, it can be difficult, but it's actually like not as difficult as one might think if you're really good at like the things that lead up to it, things like ordinary differential equations and calculus, basically. And it is. We spent an entire semester basically studying 2 equations, and that was the wave equation and the heat equation. And it is just so fucking fascinating what human ingenuity can surmise about like the nature of the universe.
It's so so amazing. I was always a math guy, and I remember I took physics, and I could not pass physics 1. And it was partly it's how it's taught. It's taught like this. I didn't have physics in high school, so I was going into it blind. And I remember it wasn't until I took the first 3 weeks of Calc 3, which isn't even calculus. They just go over vectors. Once they did that, I'm like, oh.
I'd gone through physics 1 and 2, and I was just like, dude, vector addition and vector math makes no sense to me. And then, 3 weeks into Calc 3, and you're like, this is what the fuck they were talking about? Oh.
I don't know why at CU they don't take that. Like, I don't know why they don't.
Concurrently, right?
Like, especially with physics 1, they should make you take it like sometimes they have like an extra credit class.
Yeah.
Because that also, like, one of the things I didn't like about the university is they made me feel stupid. I remember I went into my professor because I was, like, trying to pass this class. I was actually a good student. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. And I remember I go into him because I got, like, a 28 on the fucking first exam. I was so bad. But, like, and he looked at me like, you don't understand this? Like, it made me feel like the biggest idiot ever. And not until I found my own way to understand things and started to get, unfortunately, into higher levels of classes where there's fewer people. I know we've talked about before Dr. Stang.
Yep.
Best math teacher I ever had.
Shout out Dr. Kate.
Yeah, she was. I invited her on the podcast. She never got back to me.
Oh, yeah, she's incredible. She's a absolutely fantastic mind and a pleasure to learn from.
It was amazing for me to go because I took a coding and cryptography class, which was fucking amazing. And the way, like, I was able to start to understand quantum computing, and like, if you understand how things build up to that, you can understand, like you said with partial differential equations. You have to study each individual part, but then it starts to make sense. And one of the things, to just get into kind of the weeds of, quantum computing is kind of like the new thing now that everyone's talking about. And one of the things I wish, especially when it's talked in a more casual way, people would talk about is that it's amazing, but there's certain things it can't do. It's not like this God technology. And one of the things I loved about learning about it is taking these concepts, whether they be, like the heat equation, and like understanding that you can understand it, maybe not all at once, but like when I was like, oh, the reason like RSS is broken so easily by quantum computing is because quantum computing is kind of like linear algebra. It just computes everything at once. And so it's able to find that path. But it's why certain things like lattice structures it doesn't do as well. And it's amazing that, like, to me, this thing, all our data, all our math is protected by just a fucking big-ass number that's factored with big-ass prime number. That's literally how your...
Yeah.
Encryption works, and
56-bit.
Exactly. It's just the factorization of a large prime number.
Yeah, and the fact that putting things into a superposition can somehow riddle that down to a few seconds or minutes or something like that is pretty baffling. But I want to go back on something you said. So 2 things about Einstein, right? One thing was Einstein had some quote where it's something along the lines of like, you have X students with Y interests and Z abilities. And it's like, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb, like a tree, you're always going to think, like, you're always going to fail the fish, and then the fish is always going to think the fish is stupid, right? And it's like, well, no, the fish isn't stupid. It's just not fucking doing what it's meant to do. And, like, I think, someone back in the day said Einstein wasn't good at math. Like, that was where he struggled. He was good at physics, but he really struggled with math. And I was like, this dude's writing fucking 10 partial differential equations that govern all of, like, fucking reality as we know it. Like, what are we talking about? That he's not good at math. But I think it's just, like, comparison is the thief of joy, but it's also a measure, and so I don't think comparison is completely bad, but to dwell on comparison is really where where you rob yourself.
That's so good. I think comparison, I was actually just talking about this with someone. I think there's a line, because comparison is great. Like, I remember when I started martial arts.
That's exactly where I was going to go. Is that what takes Einstein a week may take me 7 fucking years to understand, but I can understand it. Like, my parents will always say that they suck at math and they can't do this and they would never understand the heat equation and the wave equation. I go, no, you would. It would just take you time, but you would have to invest the time if you wanted to learn it. But, like, there's nothing fundamental about you that is incapable about understanding waves and heat. Like,
it's just like a lot of building blocks. Like, some people can understand this Lego.
And they're time consuming, and they can be monotonous at times, and they can be tedious, especially when you're doing shit like fucking eigenvalues and stuff like that. It's a tedious, timely computation that you have to do basically to solve a lot of things in physical systems. But when you can understand it and see the physical insight in a mathematical thing, it is fucking marvelous.
So I want to get to the comparison thing, and then I want to comment on differential equations, because I never took those. But first on comparison. Comparison is the thief of joy. Like in martial arts, when I started out and I was like, that person's better at jiu-jitsu, I want to fucking strangle them. I want to prove to you I'm better. What I learned to fix it as is, if you can make comparison a form of inspiration. And I actually happened when I started to roll with girls.
Yeah,
because with girls, you do have just a strength advantage, but you don't use it because then it's just like it's not in.
You're defeating the purpose.
Exactly. But when I was able to see, I had I think Chloe.
Yes.
Yeah. When she started out that first year, she went to like the state open and got second in her division, and I think it felt better. And I was her main training partner, or one of her main training partners. It felt better than if I would have won it. And I realized that once I was able to take I need to dominate and destroy you and be like, I see what you're doing. That's awesome. I'm happy for you. You're that good. I hope I can take a bit of what you're doing and use that to inspire me to get good at what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
I think that's where comparison is actually amazing, but I think it has to have a basis of, when you compare yourself to someone, you have to be happy for them. You have to be like, even if you don't like them, at least acknowledge they're doing something good that, like, okay, I can take that. If you go into an ego thing of like, that's when I think competition and comparison just falls apart.
Dude, that's when I watch like fights where I'm rooting for one fighter and I watch the other one just outclass them, I'm never angry about it. I go, oh my God, that is brilliant, man. That is just beautiful. What a game plan, right? Like Merab and Umar, I wasn't really rooting for one or the
Poirier
other.
And Makachev.
Yes,
I love Poirier.
Man.
Like, I was rooting.
God damn, what a masterclass, dude! What a fucking brilliant fight.
Yeah,
Uncle Ive and Pereira. Like, I was just like, I was pulling for Pereira, but Uncle Ive, just beautiful, man. Beautiful. Yeah. And like, I think like the other thing to see in that comparison part too is that Einstein might be better at math or physics than me and get things in a shorter period of time than it's going to take me to understand them. But I can also probably throw a much better fucking head kick than Einstein ever could, So I'm like, all right, there's some trade-offs, and that's I think a Thomas Sowell quote is like, there's no solutions, only trade-offs.
Dude, that is literally how you have to look at things.
That's life. That is the universe.
I have so many things I love. I had to realize in martial arts.
Entropy and energy, man.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that I do a lot of things. I do martial arts. I do this podcast, do stand-up. And I realized in certain areas, especially in martial arts, I was never going to be as good unless I gave up other things. And to me, people say, "Oh, you're a jack of all trades." I don't like that term. I prefer the term generalist.
The rest of that quote though is actually much better though. It's like, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but a jack of all trades is better than a master of one. So
exactly. I think, and I view it as a generalist. Like, to me, it's
Absolutely.
The most fun to be.
Or what did they used to call it when, like a polymath,
Yeah.
or a polyglot?
Like, I talked to a friend. I think the polymath is like
specialization has gotten us away from people being so adept and abreast of like information. But I don't see any reason that people can't still get it in a different way. And I don't think of myself so highly that I am some polymath. But I think I definitely have a wide array of knowledge in a vast amount of fields that not a lot of people do, from physics, math, chemistry, all the way to martial arts, to military stuff, to history. I'm obsessed with history. Stand up, I'm obsessed with, and like, I credit Matt and Shane's Secret Podcast for that. They the fucking boys. But so funny story. Wait, so before we get off the topic, actually, because Eric Weinstein, right? So the funny story was that during COVID, he was doing a bunch of walks where he'd go on Instagram Live and pick a random person out of the thing to bring on and talk to for 15 minutes, and I get selected from it, and he's largely the reason that I chose to study physics and math. I'll be honest. I remember listening to him on one of the early Rogans that he was on, and he was saying we need more people studying physics and math. Like, string theory's dead, and we need to move on from it and find some other way. So I was like, shit, I used to judge myself by another comparison tool, right? But and maybe this is a stupid one, but I would read Wikipedia pages on all this science shit and see how far down the page I could get before I'd get lost in translation, And now I find myself able to get a remarkable way down the page before I get lost, and I'm like, that is a pretty cool feeling.
It's interesting. I think part of it is just having the confidence you can get through, and not getting overwhelmed. Like when you have a term where you're like, I don't know what that means, instead of being like, oh my god, I'm not going to understand anything, being like, okay, it's just a word. What is the rest of the sentence saying? And then you can,
context clues. That's another weird thing that I love reading.
So what'd you talk about with Eric?
Well, initially I was freaking out a little bit. This was during when a lot of the riots were happening and stuff like that, and I was like, yo, is society breaking down? What is happening? And I was probably, I'd been locked up in my house a little too long, and I had a pretty solid routine of I would wake up in the morning, get a workout in. I had a heavy bag hanging from my neighbor's deck above my patio in the backyard, so I would just be on concrete kicking a heavy bag for an hour, and then I would go on a run, come back, maybe get a body weight workout in. Then I would shower, do my homework for maybe 3-4 hours, and then I would just play Xbox with my boys and drink. And that night, I guess they were on the East Coast, so they signed off a little bit early. So I was just sitting there on Instagram Live watching this, and sure enough, he pulls me in, and I was freaking out over what was going on. He was just like, "Oh, calm down, brother." And then we just got to chatting about physics and math and stuff, and I was like, I want to be able to understand something like he proposed this geometric unity, and I just want to be able to understand it. I'm not saying it's the correct thing, but I'm interested in alternative stuff, not necessarily I don't want to get into the woo woo and the conspiracy shit as much, but I am interested in knowing why and how. Maybe why questions are the wrong ones.
I actually did a solo episode on my podcast that was sponsored by Eric because he made me believe we could leave the solar system.
I firmly believe we need to find a way.
I agree.
And to think, religion is a tricky thing for me. I was raised Roman Catholic, and I was pretty devout.
Up here, Bo.
I kind of lost my religion, or stepped away from it a little bit when everything happened with the law, and I've been trying to find my way back, and I find conflicting things sometimes with science and with religion that it doesn't worry me, but I just am like, man, all right, that's a kind of weird thing to have to. I don't understand. I don't think the Bible is pure truth. I think it's a really good collection of stories throughout history of the right and the wrong thing to do, basically, and parables and shit like that. I think there's tremendous value in them, and but I also believe in things like evolution and that the dinosaurs happened, and
Well, there's this is the thing. To quote, one of the reasons I fell in love with Jordan Peterson is he got me over my issues with Catholicism. Because one of the things I love about Peterson is that he breaks down the stories of the Bible. You don't have to believe in those stories to listen to him and to get insight from them.
That's exactly right.
And I think once I saw it like that, and I could let go of my anger about how these stories were imposed on me, I was able to let it go. Like, I know some people believe them as this, but one of the things about the Bible, and I've said this before, is it's still around. That's something. Something that's been around for 2,000 years.
No pun, but that's a testament.
It
Yeah.
it is. And I think that once, I mean, I have you read Jordan Peterson's book, We Who Wrestle with God?
No, I've not yet.
Oh, do you have to? It is such a lovely breakdown of these stories, and I think that is what they're for, is to break down these stories to help you orient yourself. You can read that book, and you don't have to. You could be an atheist, and you could get something.
I believe
from
that's
it.
actually what Israel means.
Yeah,
we wrestle with God.
It is exactly what it means.
So one of my close friends, shout out Ellie Wise. He's Mr. Wise MMA on Instagram, but he is I believe, a pro fighter here in Colorado, and he's my old roommate. We trained together a bunch. We would train at a Bang Muay Thai together a lot during COVID, and then we lived together for a few years in a couple different places. And he really he grew up in a Jewish family, and I believe he went to like a Hebrew school. But he kind of taught me a lot more about Judaism than I had ever learned. And you learn about it a lot in Catholic school, and I went to Catholic high school, but you don't learn as much as you might think. And I found there's a lot to Jewish culture that I found pretty incredible. Like I think it's Passover, the Seder.
Yeah.
That they have dinner and they argue about the same story, and they'll argue from different points of view and everything like that. And I just think like shit like that is really important to like
culture to humans.
And exactly, right. And like it is, whether or not you agree with it, believe in it entirely or at all, and like it's a story of human history that you can glean insights from.
I love Jordan Peterson's response to when people are like, well, do you believe in the Bible? He's like, well, what do you mean believe? I think that was a really good way to put it. And my friend has the book, but there's a part in the book where he talks about how belief isn't this set of axioms that you subscribe to like a fucking mailing list. Like I believe all this. I think belief is much harder than that.
No, and they're emergent, like based on experience and
your actions,
presumptions as well as perceptions, right? Like that was one of the best things I ever learned from Buds was perception is reality, right? Like how it is being perceived is exactly how it looks. If you look like you're working hard, you're probably working hard.
Yeah.
And if you look like you're being a schmuck, you're probably being a fucking schmuck.
I don't want to tilt, but I wanted to actually go back to a bit of, we were talking about Eric Weinstein. Mm-hmm. And because one thing that what really inspired me about him was he gave me the courage to want to believe we could be so much more. I think so often in every area, to people I respect, not to dish on people, but you talk about when I was in high school, like wanting to leave the solar system, and you're at me like, oh, it's impossible. Like all the physics, like all this. And one of the things I appreciate about Eric is like that almost dreamlike quality. And it's funny talking about a physicist believing in like this dream, but I think it was so important because the way he talked about it was like, oh no, this is possible. Like my sister just in December had her first kid, and so I have a niece.
Congrats.
And she's adorable, and I'm like, I want to make a world where she can live in. And I want to see, like, I love the stars. Every month I have to go up and I have to look at the stars to feel small.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to be able to point to those and, like, thinking that we could go there. I hate when you go out there and you have some physicists and you'll be like, God, maybe one day we could go. They're like, nah, it's impossible.
It's like, I know it's hard, but things that are hard are usually the things worth doing.
Exactly. And even if it isn't possible, I'd rather believe in it because I think we're going to accomplish some really cool shit.
Yeah.
If you do.
What's that the saying? It's like if you shoot for the stars, at least or shoot for the moon and you'll land among the stars or some shit.
Exactly. Like I think you have to do something like that. Eric has made me want to consider going back in because I left academia after COVID.
Yeah.
After I graduated, I'm like, I
understand.
I had to leave. And now, I mean, that's kind of why I started this podcast, was because I loved having these conversations with really smart people to discuss all these issues. I'm a big, we talked about polymaths. I think that a polymath is the highest form of what a generalist is. Yeah. I think it's like the Super Saiyan version of a generalist. And my biggest hero of all time, like if I could talk to literally anyone throughout history, hands down, without question, it would be Leonardo da Vinci. I don't know if you've ever studied Da Vinci at
Yeah,
all.
great choice. I actually had to do. I got in trouble in 6th grade science, and I had to do a biography report on Da Vinci, and I had to dress up as Da Vinci to give it. And yeah, he's fascinating.
The level at which he was, I mean, the bifocals that Benjamin Franklin, designed, he based that off of sketches from eyes that Da Vinci did. The level, he wasn't just like a painter. He was a fucking brilliant engineer. I mean, if he had Newton's equations, he would have probably, I mean, it would have been insane. And also very gay, which is super interesting. So was like, here's a fun story.
Michelangelo.
Michelangelo was gay, Leonardo was gay, and they hated each other.
And Buchanan, apparently.
Raphael was also gay.
Huh.
Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci hated each other because the rock that David is carved out of, Leonardo wanted that rock, which I love that two of like the greatest artists in history and these gay guys, they hate each other over the straightest possible argument. That's my rock. No, it's my rock. No, it's my rock. It's my rock. It's my rock. But anyway.
It just shows you that they're exactly like us.
Yeah, and I mean, you see, like the sketches. Like we lost a lot of Leonardo's notebooks, and people will find sketches. Here's the story where someone was flipping through a notebook of his, and they found that 2 pages were stuck together, and they undid the page, and it was the design for a bicycle 400 years before it was invented. Like this guy, I think that idea that I think Eric embodies now of being like everything stand up history. I think those intertwine and they lift you up. I think podcasting has allowed people to expand those interests and in ways where your love of history can ignite an idea in this area. I think that's so important. And I mean, to tie it back to martial arts, I view it as it's so important to be a white belt at everything.
Oh,
having that mindset of I leave your ego at the door. Exactly.
Best info I can give you. And just to say something else that Eric did for me personally was like he kind of illuminated to me the history of physics and mathematics, which is it's a riveting tale. Like it is such a fascinating story of, I believe it was like Euclid or Archimedes or someone like that, like almost solved the tangent line problem that then went unsolved for 2,000 years until Newton. And like it's hypothesized that if he had been able to solve it, we would have had planes around the times of Jesus. And like to think about,
it's probably Archimedes then.
Yeah, I believe it was him.
Because Archimedes was like,
actually no, I think it was Euclid because Euclid was Euclid's elements was where basically like the basis of geometry. And
yeah.
And it's I believe historically considered like one of the first forms of proof of mathematics.
Well, I mean, the Euclidean algorithm is used to this day. I mean, it's.
There's massive things, right? Like we model most things in Euclidean space, and then we have Euclidean and non-Euclidean geometries and stuff like that. And like I believe the definition of like a manifold in higher mathematics is literally like something that resembles Euclidean space when at a localized point. So when you zoom in on the space, it looks like 3D like we're used to, XYZ axis kind of thing. And man, that's like but building on. Like we stand on the shoulders of giants, and to say that we can't reach the stars, that there's not life elsewhere, is like, to me, it's so egotistical in a way.
And to me, it's. I think I said this in that bit. I said it's boring. Like I don't care if I'm wrong. I'd rather be wrong and have this mindset because it's so much more fun.
Yeah.
That belief of like as a person. One of my first I don't know if you've ever been to Creede, Colorado.
No, I don't think
so.
I have.
So my family's been in Colorado since like 1904. So long history here, and my grandfather's 93. He still rides his bike 50 miles a week, and they tell me stories of what Colorado used to be like. When my dad was a kid, my dad was born in the 60s. There was not as many people here, and so there's very few mountain towns that haven't been these big ski towns, which I'm not like, it's not necessarily a negative thing, but there's very few towns that are like unchanged. One of them is a town called Walden, Colorado.
Cotopaxi.
Yeah.
Salida.
Yeah.
All right, that's I went hunting down there. That's where one of my good buddies from the Navy is from. And wow, I was just like, God damn, bro, this shit looks like what was it? Something Canyon maybe. Can't remember exactly, but I mean, this shit looked untouched, you know, and his family has been here for generations on generations and, like, on the same land. And I was just like, holy smokes.
I mean, there's something to it. Like in Walden, Colorado, the only thing that's changed in 40 years is the Conoco is now a Sinclair. And Creed is like that. It's kind of it's off the kind of beaten path, a little like west of the San Luis Valley.
Okay.
And it's an old silver mining town. There's not a lot out there, but my family used to have a house up there before we lost it. And one of my first memories ever was going out and looking at the stars. When I met friends at CU who said they'd never seen the stars because they grew up out east.
Dude, I didn't.
I was like, get in my fucking truck. We're going fucking to the fucking mountains tonight.
I hadn't seen them till 25 years old, where I really seeing it for the first time. I grew up in Jersey, obviously, and then
no VR will ever.
No, and I mean, you know, I was already obsessed with space, and then I went and camped in Green River, Utah, with some friends, and the first night I just stayed completely sober because I was just like, I got to see what this is like with my normal eyes, and I was speechless.
It's
speechless.
It is this. If you ever have a problem or an ego, go sit there because you'll look at these and you'll be like, oh yeah, I ain't shit. But it's not people think that's, oh, you feel small. But you feel small, but also in a way that you matter.
Connected to things so far and so in so long ago.
Exactly.
I mean, you're seeing things that legitimately are billions of years old. Millions of years, and it's like the longer you can keep your eyes open, the more light hits your retina, and the more stars turn on in the night sky, and it's
and you're gonna see a shooting star at some point.
Innumerable.
And when I think of that, like that is my first memory as a kid. It's just looking up and being like, oh my god! And everyone has this story, so maybe it's basic, but it's something that's so fundamental. And Eric was the first person to instill in me is like, I want to believe in that. I want to believe things are possible. One of the reasons I do this podcast is because I want to connect people. Like I come from a lot of different backgrounds, like comedy in this. And I think when people are connected that's when things happen. I don't know if I'll go back and end up doing, math and science, I guess, on the path of figuring out what's right. But I think asking these questions, I mean, there's so many new mediums. Another person who I know, I'm sure you follow is 3 Blue 1 Brown.
Of course, Grant Sanderson.
Well, what's it? 3 Blue 1 Brown, or
3 Blue 1 Brown. So I believe that's because he has like diachromatia in one of his eyes, but only like 3/4 of the eye is blue, and then 1/4 of the iris is brown.
So that was I remember I did not understand linear algebra, and I passed linear algebra with an A.
Same.
Until I'm like, this is why this stuff is fucking magical. It's basically how all computers work. It's how you display this on a screen. And then again, I mean, I mentioned before, his video on differential equations, just the intro video. I took like the beginning of, I think, Ordinary, but to me, what he does is actually more important than the technical stuff. Because the technical stuff you have to know if
building intuition in a visual sense for things that are so esoteric in some ways.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to get lost in the computation of it.
For people who are listening, differential equations are really important when you have I say this, people are like, calculus, what's calculus? It's literally like, I tell them, look at you see your car speedometer? That's calculus right there.
Yeah, so I think Steven Strogatz is probably... He's a professor of applied mathematics at Cornell. And he has a couple of books. It started out, so the first book is called The Joy of X. And it is just a fucking excellent book. But it starts from, like, the notion of counting up to, like, calculus and differential equations.
I'm going to put that down.
He's got a couple. So first one is called The Joy of X.
Joy of X.
And it started off as like a newspaper column in the New York Times where some columnist had asked him, like, do you mind writing some short columns on, like, mathematics topics for people? And he was just like, yeah, I guess. Like, where do you even want me to start? Just, I don't know, wherever you think to. So he was like, all right, let's start with numbers, like number theory, and just like the notion of, having two of something, right? Like, I have an apple and an orange. Or let's say I have 2 apples, right? Okay, well, I have 1 apple, then I have 2 apples. But then it's like, all right, well, if I have an apple and an orange, I still have 2 things in a way. right? Like,
Yeah,
but two different things. And like, so this like, category theory then, right? And then like it set theory, and it builds on itself. And then he gets into like, so he has a statement or a quote that's like, since the time of Newton, mankind has come to realize that the language of nature is written in the language of differential equations. Something along those lines.
That was literally on to
the laws of nature. Excuse me.
Yeah, because I think when people hear calculus, I think sometimes when we teach this stuff, we don't teach it in the right way. We don't teach linear algebra right. You have to teach people and stuff they can understand. Calculus is just how things change. So if you're walking down the street, how fast are you walking?
It's a study of rates of change.
Exactly.
Differential equations is taking that to its like logical conclusion, and then a little bit further to solve real life problems. Like a lot of things in physics mimic basically two.
Because wasn't the big one was the three bodies problem?
So the three body problem is like. So we have something called two-body problems, right? Two-body central force problems. And it's when you have, like, two bodies of distinguishable mass that are orbiting around one another. And that orbit is predictable because, you can basically plot the motions of the planets, and the way they change with respect to one another is always like, it's an immeasurable amount. And the reason that we could do that with things like the planets in the solar system is that the sun is so fucking massive compared to everything else that we can basically mitigate the mass of all of the other planets and just look at two bodies orbiting one another as the individual planet you want to look at in the 8. But and the same with the dwarf planets and shit like that also
or the sun, the Earth and the Moon.
Exactly. And then now when you introduce a third body into that, you get into something called chaos theory, where the motion of the bodies involved, like the three masses that you're looking at, are no longer predictable orbits. They go into literally chaotic orbits, and it's there are a few like fundamental ones that we can solve, but most of them are unsolvable equations. So
is it just to help because understand this? Are they just unsolvable because you have three different parts that are all changing in such a way and affecting one another that it is impossible?
So it looks
to predict?
like three parts, right? But then you have to think about it like if we just break it down into Euclidean kind of stuff, right? Then that's 9 parameters for each planet. And then you want to take into
each
account
one how they relate to each other and relating to themselves.
Right? And then so you get into the problem of like a reference frame and like, okay, well, what reference frame do I want to choose? And usually you want to go for the center of mass of the system. Probably going to lie somewhere around the sun, pretty close to it.
But also that center of mass could change based on how those things are changing, couldn't they?
Yes. And so that's why it becomes like a really, really difficult problem. So you'll need 3 components, right? If you would just wanted to do it in Euclidean, you would need 3 components, really 4 components.
And what do you mean, just to break it down?
So like X, Y, Z.
Euclidean, okay.
Yeah, and then you would also, so actually it's much more than that. So I should say, you would actually probably break it down into something like 7 components for each of the things. So then you think, okay, 21 components to keep track of that I have to do 21 sets of equations for. Some of them will not have, so differential equations are very, very hard to solve. That's like the number one thing that you learn is that the best method of solving these things is to guess and then see if it works. That's literally how it goes. And so
and so is it kind of because the guess, you're like, okay, you're having something, your guess is kind of like a constant that you can center the things around.
Let's say it's this way, right? So you have this notion of a derivative, right, from calculus, which is just a rate of change with one thing with respect to another. Might be position with respect to time, which we call velocity, or it could be the rate of change of velocity with respect to time, which we call acceleration. And, this is like what Newton taught us. This is what he invented was calculus to solve like this problem of like orbiting bodies.
I think it was Leibniz.
Exactly. Yeah, well, both of these fellas, in their own ways. And then Newton just happened to be the louder of the two and won out, I guess, in the argument. But we use Leibniz notation, which is actually pretty funny.
It's funny. I read a great book called The Information, which if you ever want to see like a quick theory of information. The funny thing is that there were a lot of people after Newton who really, in England, there was one guy, was it Babbage? But there was one, it may have been Charles Babbage. It may have, I don't know if it was Charles Babbage, but it was someone who actually was marketing against Newton's notation because his notation was just fucking so hard to understand.
Egregious.
It was egregious. And so what they basically did was like, okay, we'll give all the credit to Newton. We'll still say we're for Newton, but we're going to take all of Leibniz's notation because it makes fucking sense and you can understand it. And it's a mix of, they're basically catering to egos. It's a fucking hysterical story. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, so differential equations, right? So the mathematical, like literally definition is some unknown, so an equation involving some unknown function and its derivative. And that's what an ordinary differential equation is. And that means like you're studying a rate of change of something with respect to something else, and then some function, which is usually, especially in a physics context, generally like a position. It's like where something will be at a point in time. And like it gives you predictive power over the motion of objects, And, so they're very important to solve. And then when you add more than one variable changing, that is what gets into what's called a partial differential equation, where you have some unknown function and its partial derivatives rather than its whole derivatives. So, you look at like the pieces of how things change in X, Y, and Z, or R theta phi if you want to go for like a spherical.
But you're saying instead of theta's changing versus, and you're holding others constants like a partial.
Yes,
correct?
when you take a partial derivative. And then, you have some calculus rules that you have to follow, things like the chain rule and the product rule and the quotient rule. And then you get into actually some analysis. And analysis is essentially like the proof of single variable calculus. Every math major at CU has to take a class called Analysis 1, Math 3001. And it's essentially the topology of the real number set. And you learn about things like the Heine-Borel theorem and the squeeze theorem and the mean value theorem from calculus, and like the root test and the alternating series test and all these kinds of things that seem a little esoteric when you take a calculus
But they're
class.
so important because it's kind of built off of I think discrete mathematics is the like pre-class to that. It's kind of the building blocks of mathematics, which is so funny that you get to it like much later in your theory.
And what's really incredible about math, I think, and shout out Dr. Magdalena Zubak from CU, but she always says, like, it's math. Like, the rules of the game, right? We all started from if P, then Q, and now we're here. Like, every statement that has followed is either an axiom, and then everything that follows that is logically truthful from that axiom, or it's a step of, logical steps that you're taking, like from A to Z, and you've taken all these steps literally starting from algebra 1 in like 6th grade all the way up to partial differential equations, where sometimes the hardest part of the fucking math is the algebra. Like factoring fucking shit can be hard.
Oh no, every time on a math test I fucked up and got something wrong, it wasn't because of like I differentiated wrong. It was because I put a minus and it was a fucking plus.
Yeah, and like you can go back to like Sumerian tablets and like Babylonian tablets that have like mathematics on them, and it starts from that, and it's built up to like what we have today with fucking geostationary satellites and fucking the James Webb Telescope, and things are so. I'm obsessed for no reason really with aircraft. I just think like flight is incredible, and the theory of lift and aerodynamics, all that shit is so captivating to me.
Oh, that's awesome.
I don't blame it. I credit. I took a class at CU called like the history of humans in aviation. It was an aerospace engineering class, and I can't remember the professor's name, and I apologize. I want to say it was like Hank Scott maybe, but he was a fighter pilot for the Australian Royal Air Force. He flew helicopters at first, and then he later flew fixed wing aircraft, and we had to do like an aircraft accident investigation report kind of thing, where like you have to go through like an aircraft accident that happened and like what came out of that, and kind of getting in the weeds here, but I'm so captivated by it.
No, go into it. This is what this is for. I want people to get into weeds. I love when people talk about what they're passionate about.
Simple things like a plane flies, right? The theory of lift basically is that air flows faster over flat surfaces than it does curved surfaces. So if you look at the wing of an airplane, it has a flat part on the bottom, and then it has that beveled curve on the top. And that's so that it creates a pocket of low pressure above and a pocket of high pressure beneath, so that pressure wants to equalize, and you lift the plane.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah, and it's
Is it also why that, like, if you disturb that pocket, is that why when you point down versus up, like, that can...
Well, so that's why they'll have, like, the ailerons, right? Like, and then it's also why planes don't, when they descend, they don't usually just dip straight down, right? Like fighter jets will, you know, when they're, like, taking hard angles and something like that. But, like, that's where you're going to experience massive amount of G-force and stuff like that, or when you're accelerating up like that, you know, going against gravity. Actually, I'm sorry, they wouldn't get a massive amount of G going down, but like the opposite.
Yeah, because it's pulling you, and it's literally okay.
Well, when you're going up, right? Like you're adding to the G's that are going down towards the Earth versus when you're going down. But planes, when they descend, usually will like gradually kind of glide, and they'll use those like those flaps on the wings. I think that's called an aileron, something like that. But they'll like put those flaps up, and that'll help to like create, I think it's basically like quadratic air that is slowing the plane down on those like little parts of the wing. But little shit like that, where it's just like you use this and you don't even think about it. Like a subway is fucking nuts. Like there's so many systems that we take for granted, you know, that like water treatment facilities and shit like that, where it's like, you have any idea the manpower and the knowledge that has to go into things like a hydroelectric dam, like,
or I mean, to get back to jump into like history stuff, it's like it's so amazing what humans have done. Like even in the past, like we still don't know how the Romans built their aqueduct system. Yeah, we can't replicate
62 miles or something like that from like mountains all the way to provide water for Rome.
Yeah, like, and I mean it was. I have a joke that I love. I have to tell you is, you know, there was like people ask me like, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? And I'm like, only twice a week, because I spend the other 5 days thinking about the Roman Republic.
Of course,
you know. And I think that it is so interesting, human ingenuity, and one of the things I think maybe it's why I started this podcast was fun fact. I went to a really weird high school. Like, we didn't have grades. People call it the hippie high school. At the end of every class, you would write like a 5-page paper on what you learned. And you couldn't just be like, well, I came to class every day, and you never did. Like, there were standards. Yeah. But they were like, what do you want to learn? And I fell in love with Japanese culture. I speak Japanese. And I got to go to Japan on a school project. It was super awesome, but it really taught me to love learning. And funny thing is, Evergreen, where Brett Weinstein used to teach, came to my school because it was a very similar like school. And a lot of people will say the same thing about that because it wasn't this big university. We did not have the people who were traditionally seen as the smart type of smart. It was a different type. But those type of people can still learn and make amazing things. They just don't learn in the same way that is standard. It's one of the reasons I suck at fucking taking tests. Same. To this day, I fucking lose it. I can't take tests well. But I'm really good at understanding and explaining technical information. I just have to have my own way to do it. And I think that now with podcasts and these other routes, like another thing I don't know if you've ever looked at is like Peterson Academy. Jordan Peterson started this like online academy where he's brought in people to teach these amazing classes, and these professors are getting to literally teach anything, and they're accessible to anyone, and it's dirt cheap. It's like $400 a year, and you get these awesome courses. And I think that is so important because especially in this new age where there's technology, there's these new things, there's certain aspects of the university system that are amazing. I love. Part of me wants to go back for them, but there are some parts, like one thing I didn't like is I had to take a bunch of dumb classes that like I mean they were cool, I learned stuff, but it seems expensive. Why am I having to pay for this? And I think that it's important now to let people follow their interests, because if you force people to learn what they don't want to learn, I mean, there's certain things you do need to learn regardless, you know, but I think letting people follow their interests. Brett always said that if you can get someone to want to learn something, it's over. Like, it's just a matter of time. And that's what I think is super important, is to get people to want to learn something in a way that appeals to them no matter what it is. Like the way you talk about, I love hearing you talk about physics. You said you're going into the weeds. I love when people go in the weeds. I had my friend come over. I don't know anything about cars. He's like a fucking car nut. We just talked about cars for 2 hours. It was amazing. And I think that is what is so, like, when people love something, it's so infectious. Like, you and physics in that draft. I think we almost lose some of that. It's almost beaten out of us now to ask those questions.
And I've seen the good and the bad, especially in like higher academia, where you have some professors who are there mainly for research, and then they have to teach as well. And they do not conduct a classroom the same way as the teaching professors do. Like there's one, shout out Professor Pollock. Professor Stephen Pollock, he won like an award for being like the best physics professor in the United States at some point. He is, I had the fortune of taking E&M 2 with him, or electricity and magnetism 2, where you get into what's called electrodynamics and electromagnetic waves and like how real life shit operates, radiation and how a radio tower
so
works. It's fucking incredible. And like he would be able to describe to me, like when you have a magnet in your Apple Pen, that you stick to your iPad, what's happening is there's a little current that's then like driving, a magnetic field through the wire in the, a little curl of wire in the pen that's then like alternating the current so that it's charging the pen. Like it's just...
There was a great video because I never understood how magnetism, electromagnetism is one force.
It is trippy as shit.
It's literally, I remember that there was a great visual of the movement, because the movement generates the current, which then generates the magnetism. So it's why when something stays still, it won't do anything.
So if you have like a changing magnetic flux through a loop of wire, you'll drive a current. But also if you drive a current through a loop of wire, you'll create a B field through the center of the loop. And it's
so it was when people realized that's one force. It's not like there's it's the current of electricity causes magnetism. It's why like the movement was like intuitive to me. It's like, the Earth has a magnetic field. Mm-hmm. Well, why? Well, because our core is iron.
Yeah,
and that
iron and nickel that's flowing around the molten core. Well, we have a solid core, we think, at the very center, and then there's like a molten part around it of just like liquid iron and nickel that essentially like sloshes in there and creates a magnetic field, and because of all these like oscillating electric fields.
Was it the electrons they shove up against each other, or was it the...
and then the way we think about like current is a positive flow, like the flow of positive protons basically, but positive charges, and then that's not actually what happens in currents. What is actually happening is that the electrons are flowing in the opposite direction of the current, and they're being transferred from atom to atom, like in a small little chemical reactions basically happening at femtoseconds, whatever that is, like very small periods of time. But that's another, like, material science is another fascinating subject. Just like titanium alloys and shit like that. I find like ultralight backpacking equipment to be fucking amazing. Like the way they build jet stoves and shit, like camping stoves, and I'm just like, holy fuck, this thing can boil water at altitude in like 3 minutes.
Well, also, or just like I mean, even simpler than that. Like as a person, so I another big passion of mine is I've summited 16 of the 54 14ers in Colorado. And last, so my aunt, she's a badass. She won like second place in when she was women's 44 division in Hawaii Ironman, which is like the toughest division. Savage. And she moved to Montana, but she would have had all 54, but she has one more of the 54 to do. And we did one of the last three of the last ones to do, which is Blanca, Ellingwood, and Little Bear. And Little Bear, I don't know if you've heard anything about that. It's literally, I think, less than 2 miles out and back. It is easy. It took us 8.5 hours.
I was gonna say that vertical must be.
There's a point literally where you are going up something that is like this, and the big thing is the rock fall. If anyone's above you, there's this thing, the hourglass, and the sound of a rock coming down literally haunts my dreams. Like the sound of dong dong, because I mean,
yeah, oh yeah.
Remember, what is it? 9.8 meters per second. I remember at one point there was someone above me. They yelled rock. I jumped under this little alcove, and if I was 4 seconds, a rock would have landed on my head.
Yeah, it's no joke, man. These mountains are, they might seem like they're not, like they're doable. A few years ago, me and 2 friends tried to summit Bierstadt in October, and we got caught in a whiteout 300 feet from the summit, and like literally probably minus 30 with the wind chill. Like 0 degrees, no visibility, horrifying fucking conditions, and we had to scoot down on our butts because we were just like, all right, that's a sheer fucking cliff off to that side. That's a
Mountains
3,000
are
foot
not
drop.
dangerous until they are. Unlike the ocean, where you look at the ocean and you're like, that's dangerous. That mountain, it's clear now.
I can't remember the guy's name, but the first American who tried to summit K2 back in the 50s described it as it's a savage mountain that tries to kill you. And, like, more people have been to space than have summited K2. It is a fucking gnarly mountain.
People love to do, like, Mount Everest, but Mount Everest is not a technical mountain.
No,
it's
not like
dangerous.
K2.
Like, when people say as a mountaineer and people are like, I've done Everest, I'm like, okay, whatever. When someone says,
So you have money.
Yeah, exactly. But K2, anyway, and when I was climbing Little Bear, so I'm with my aunt, and I'm with another guy we met, Todd, to climb with, and these are black belts, they know. And when you're climbing this, there's no rope. And if you get scared and you tense up, like, you want to think, oh, I can. Well, if you want to get down, you have to down climb.
Yeah.
If you want to get up, you can't look up. And so I don't know if you've ever read Dune, but like there's
Seen
like
the movies, I have not read.
Do you know the time when they're like, I must not fear, fear is the mind killer, that thing? I was literally reciting that over and over in my head because I'm like, you cannot get scared, because if you get scared, you're going to tense up and fall. And just one rock at a time, going up little by little. To me, that is where, like, you look at this mountain and you're like, I'm not going to fucking climb that. And it's like you are, and you get to the top and it's this amazing thing. I love that. But then, I mean, to go back to the physics thing, like the camp stove, the way that it's able to utilize basic Newton's equations to hold this little tripod up so it can hold your heavy pot, and how the center of gravity is just such positioned so that...
And also just even that, but like even the pots aren't that heavy, you know? Like the entire fucking system weighs like less than 2 pounds. That's
That's why
to me. Because fuel is the heaviest part.
We were going up, and I had to carry a rope that was it was less than 4 pounds. That's nothing. 4 pounds when you're climbing.
Carry for 8 hours. You ever do lateral raises or like front raises with 5 pounds for like, just do arm haulers. Just do, literally lay on your stomach, lift your head up, and then do this with your feet up. And I promise you, after 25 of them, you're going to be like, holy crap, this is awful.
It was so interesting because Little Bear's kind of, it's situated up there. And the worst part is you have to climb 5 miles in. But this 5 miles has 5,000 feet of elevation gain. So it is a foot mile. So you are doing like this the whole time with 50 pounds on your back. I would, like, after that, I look at mountains, and you have to climb them first. They don't curse you, but I say, fuck you, respectfully.
Yes.
I'm never going back up that fucking trail again.
It's a type 2 fun.
Yeah, it is a type 2 fun, but the reason I do it is because I have bipolar, and I have so much energy all the time. But after a 14er, it sucks. 14ers suck. Like, there's not, like, a fun part about them. They do suck. But
even the summit, you're like, all right,
yeah.
I'm here.
But then down is actually more dangerous, which is why you have to be careful. Yeah. But when you're done, the world could end. I don't give a flying fuck. You have the most peaceful, serene feeling, and the top of a 14er, it's like a religious experience. It's you cannot replicate it. It's so amazing. I mean, you said you've done Bierstadt. Have you done any others?
We did not summit Bierstadt, and I've not summited any others. No 14ers, but I would love to get back to it, but I also want to go. I want to be safe about it. I'll be smart. And then I had knee surgery last year, so I'm still trying to get my
knees over toes?
hiking legs back. Oh yeah, I was big on knees over toes, man. That actually that fucking salvaged. It took about a year, so I had to get surgery through the VA, and the VA doesn't like do anything fast because they work for the government. They are the government. And when I initially met with the orthopedic surgeon, he had asked me, he's like, dude, what are you doing? And I said, I've been following this knees over toes guy on YouTube. And he's like, well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because you're going to be infinitely better off, man. Like, this is awesome. Like, you're maintaining musculature all the way to, like, surgery. That's what you want. And I was able to do just about everything other than kickbox, which is, you know, my bread and butter, unfortunately. But
dude, that's why I started to do it. It's amazing what these fucking just lateral, you know, like the butt on the wall, like toe raises do.
All of it is incredible. And, like, it's simple shit that you can do at home on your everyday, like, that will benefit you immensely. And, like, you know, you might not be able to see the gratification immediately, but that delayed gratification is going to be awesome when you're 50 years old and you don't need a knee replacement. Like, you know.
That toe raise, which I can't remember what is
tibialis raise.
Tibialis raise. Thank you. That, as a person who does a lot of 14ers and then also kickboxes, so I know I'm gonna have fucking shitty knees. Mm-hmm. That, especially coming down a mountain, it's so amazing.
Yeah, that's the hardest part.
Have that, like, well. When you have that, like, you can feel when your tibia is strong because the way you place your foot, you literally feel like it's not just on your knee. Because I had a form of scoliosis, and luckily through physical therapy, I've straightened it back out. But for a long time, I was putting so much more pressure on my left knee because I wasn't using the muscles. I was putting pressure on the knee itself. And as you've done the knees over toes, it's subtle because it's not like an awesome, like picking up something super heavy. But when you notice that, like, the way you walk, you're much more firm.
Yeah.
You feel like
sure-footed.
It's amazing.
And even that, and then, like, it was supposed to be about a 9-month recovery for the surgery that I had on my knee, and I was back to kickboxing in like 5 months, 6 months maybe. So I was like, fuck yeah, man. Like, this shit pays dividends.
You said you were professional. Can you tell me about that? Like,
professional
for fighting?
No, I was not professional, just amateur.
Oh, amateur.
Yeah, I competed in probably about 5 kickboxing fights, 3 Muay Thai fights, and 1 MMA fight. Did one like national tournament for kickboxing. Won that one. That was pretty cool.
Oh, you did? Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah. When was that?
That one was in 2021. My buddy Ellie and I went to Nashville. We both competed in the Waco national tournament. Both won gold, which is pretty cool. And then, other than that, I would fight in, like, Brian took me to a few fights. I did a few Muay Thai and kickboxing fights with Bri down at, like, the Denver Convention Center and where else? Stampede in Aurora.
Shout out to Brian Scott. He's been on here. I love him.
Shout out Bri Scott, man. The GOAT. My older brother.
He's the best martial artist I know.
He's a beautiful, beautiful soul and a wonderful human being.
He is. I told him.
Took me in when I had no one. He saw me kicking heavy bags, and he asked me if I ever had a coach. I said, nope, I'm just looking for someone that'll take me in. And he was like, all right, I got a guy that's getting ready for a fight. Why don't you come in and spar him? I said, yes, sir. So got right to it, and he has looked after me ever since.
He is. He's my bipolar brother.
Yeah.
And I told him, because I tell him he's the best martial artist I know. He's like, what are you talking about? Brian, Ben Lowry and Charlie Ninkin. And I say, because Brian, you don't realize the depth of your martial arts. Like, he is like a generalist of all martial arts.
He's that polymath, but for martial arts.
He is.
He's a polymartial artist,
Eskrima, kickboxing,
bro, that dude is
jiu-jitsu.
famous in the Philippines. Like, he lands, everyone's like, holy fucking shit, big white guys here. Right? And, like, Filipino stick and knife fighting. That's what Eskrima is for people that don't know. And, like, yeah, that's a savage fucking profession to hold. And he's an 8-time world champion.
Yeah, and you look at him and you're like, this guy just looks like he's from fucking Wisconsin, and he is. But I think
he's also a fucking killer.
He's a killer, but
also just a sweetheart of a human. He's a teddy bear.
I'll have to tell you a story. Daniel Wynn, right?
Wrestler, recognize the name.
Yeah, wrestler dude. Yeah. I kind of started around the same time as Daniel, and Daniel I was doing stand-up, so I wasn't training as much as he is. And he'd always, he's a wrestler, so he'd kick my fucking ass at jiu-jitsu all the time. But I always came from a more kickboxing background, so I has a little bit of an edge. But he quickly got so good at that, and one time he just he was pretty soon beating my ass at that too. And this was a while back, but I remember there was one time, and he's since gotten much better at boxing, but it was boxing. And I was a little bit better of a boxer than him. And I think one time he starts to kind of cover up. And I've gotten my ass beat by him so many times that kind of like go for the kill comes in. He ends up covering up like this down. And I start like throwing a little like hammer fist, like trying to end it. And I loved how Brian ended it, because Brian did the one thing how you break up a fight with two people who are fighting. You don't run in with a ton of energy and try to rip the guy off of him. Brian literally walked in and he was like, hey, yo, calm down. And
we're good.
To me, I was like, that is the sign of an expert, someone who can break up a fight without I was like, oh my God, that the way, the calm, and now not to diss on Daniel. Daniel will now fucking kick my ass on boxing too. Like I'm nothing special. That's like the only one little the time I can raise the flag up and be like, yeah. But it was so awesome to be there. I mean, Brian is the reason I didn't fucking absolutely loathe CU after COVID.
Yeah, man, he really he saved my entire outlook on the organization as a whole, basically, and man, he has a couple of quotes that I live my life by, especially around martial arts. Like, there are no bad martial arts, only bad martial artists.
I tell that to other martial artists who are professionals,
all the time,
and they love
every
it.
person that I've ever begin teaching to. Also, I got some friends that want to learn kickboxing and shit, so I'll bring them in. I'm like, dude, there are two things: no bad martial arts, only bad martial artists. No bad moves, only bad times to throw them. So you just got to know, and knowing the rules to break the rules. So maybe three things. Sorry.
Yeah.
But knowing the rules to break the rules is really a fundamental. And I was just listening to something else the other day where, they're talking about, like, when you get the fundamentals down, like, you get a notion for, like, the philosophy behind why something is done. And that's a whole different thing than just, like, knowing how to throw, a jab cross hook, right? Like, probably one of the greatest, most basic combos any martial artist could ever learn that wants to throw their hands. But to do that, and then you watch Floyd Mayweather do it or Canelo do it, it looks like a fucking different thing, because they have mastered those fundamentals to such an extent that they can exploit what the philosophy of the other guy's game, basically, to then implement the same fundamentals in a fucking electric way. But that's why it's martial arts, It is a fucking beautiful thing to watch someone put it together.
It is. I mean, one of the things that Brian was so fundamental to me in kickboxing that started to click is a good kickboxer will stand in front of you and you won't be able to touch them. They will literally stand feet from you, and it's because, as Brian says, bad footwork, bad fighter. And when he broke down lines and circles...
Dude, straight lines beat circles, circles beat straight lines.
Once you click that, like, and I wouldn't say I am, I'm definitely a hobbyist. I'm not perfect at it, but that's when I was able to go for, if someone doesn't know how to fight, I can win. Because it's how you move. Like, you want to throw the round kick, but if you throw the round kick when you're on the frickin', if you don't step off your line, you're not going to fucking, you're not going to throw it right. It's not going to hit right. You're not going to turn your hip over at that moment.
Especially Muay Thai, man. Muay Thai is a fuck you sport, dude. Everything should say, fuck you. I'm here. You got to be in here with me, not the other way around. And that's like, it's a little bit of ego for sure, but it's also, from a coaching aspect, though, it's actually like, it's an important, like, lesson to learn, like, as a human, to me, like, you got to be in here with me, not the other way around.
Max Madorsky, shout out to him. He was on this podcast. He's a fighter from here, and he went and he had several fights in Thailand. I think he had 8 fights in Thailand going back there. MMA fights, amazing guy. He was telling me about fighting prisoners in Thailand. Because in Thailand...
that's how you can get out early, right?
Yeah, well, no, it's what they do when you're a white guy. And they're
Okay.
like, we don't think you're good enough to fight our actual fighters, so we're going to have you fight prisoners because they're not fed, they're not kept, they're not trained properly. And the prisoners, if they win, they get time off their sentence.
Yeah,
so there was like this one guy who stabbed like 16 people but was just good at fighting, so he got off in 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different way of passing judgment, I suppose.
And it was so interesting. I went to
I will say, though, sorry to cut you off,
no,
but I do think martial arts is actually probably one of the best things for rehabilitation in prison.
Oh, no. I wrote
really
a paper in
you.
high school about how if you wanted to decrease violence in the inner city, you'd teach everyone how to fight.
Yeah, man. Rogan has a thing, right, about teaching young men martial arts, and I think it's imperative.
I think it's so fundamental because, one, it does. I think the reason there's two reasons why. Number one, it gives you a structure to improve in, which all men need. And it also shows you what you're not. Like, I was holding pads for this kid Max, and he didn't know who I was, so I was throwing kicks. And he's like, I wasn't expecting this much for just some comedian, and I appreciate it. I hold pads for him, and I had not hold pads for professional fighters since I held for Drew Johnson, and he throws, and I kid you not, I'm like, my forearms are gonna fucking snap. The level of power that guy was throwing, I was like, oh my, I forgot what this was. This level to throw, like the professional fighter strength of a fucking round kick.
Yeah, man, I got to see a brief time when TJ Dillashaw was getting ready for his comeback to the UFC after being off for the cheating stuff. But I got to see him. I got to see Juan Archuleta in camp. I got to see Bobby King Green. I'm sorry, Bobby King. And they like watching the way a professional can fucking hit shit. You go, God damn, dude.
You'd get this. Humans really struggle with exponential growth. We're linear creatures. And I think in not just fighting, but we'll use fighting for now, in all professions, like stand-up is another one. People scale exponentially. So a professional fighter like Max, he's not twice, 3, 5 times good as me. He's 10, 100 times better than me. When you see a UFC fighter, he's 1,000 times better than you. They scale exponentially because I think skills, especially when it's your profession, scale like that.
But it's also experience, man. Like, there's nothing to be said for, like, the way I started my first fights versus the way I started my last fights. I mean, you would think it was two different people in the, the ring or the cage, whatever it was. And it's like, I think this comes back to the comparison thing a little bit. But you kind of see, like, all right, this dude can throw a question mark kick like I fucking can't. Like, what is he doing that I'm not doing? Like, let me study this. And if you can do something slow, you can do it fast. And I think that's what I think that's where these guys are, like, amazing, is that they've honed in on these fundamentals and these skills so much in the slow version that, they train fast now. And it looks fucking fast and it looks hard as shit because it is. And, like, that comes from just stacking up, was the Bruce Lee quote? It's like, I fear not the man who's thrown 10,000 kicks one time, but the man who's thrown one kick 10,000 times.
That is exactly it. Like, I tell...
or even that Malcolm Gladwell, like 10,000 hours kind of thing. Like,
I tell people when
outliers.
They want to learn, like, some basic fighting, I'm like, if you want to win a fight, learn how to throw a good one, too.
Yeah. And if you want to, you want to get good at Muay Thai, you want to get good at punching or kicking things, right? Like, I'll tell you right now, start shadow boxing every time you see a fucking mirror. Every time you see your reflection, shadow box a little bit, throw some head movement in there. Every time you have to turn a light switch off, teep it. Do a fucking do it.
I've gotten in trouble at work because we have, like, those push doors, and I'll just kick them open.
Yeah, dude, it's the best way to get good, and then it teaches you dexterity, control. Like, you can't do it. You're not gonna want to fucking kick a hole in your wall when you're trying to turn your light off. So you got to, like, do it gracefully. And all right, maybe you need to stretch more.
Exactly, and that, I think what you said there about the experience is so big. It's one of the things why when I'm around. Because it's interesting when I'm at a mic with someone like Max, like, people like equate us. Like, someone's like, you two should fight, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. There's levels to this, and a big part of that is, and you could actually get the more you do it, the way, like, I saw a video on Brian's Instagram of you talking about law of conservation of momentum,
yeah.
and the way you describe that is, like, if you're tense like this, you already have so much energy, you don't have enough. But if you're relaxed, it's so much easier.
An elastic collision, versus an inelastic collision and shit like that. Like, if I want to transfer more energy, I should probably try and make it as much of an elastic collision as I can, and like, without getting into the physics of all that shit. It's just like I think focusing on the philosophy of things early on in martial arts is actually more important than just like. There's something to be said for drinking from the fire hose, and when I went to Bang Muay Thai, it was a lot more of that than where at Brian, I think, focuses a little more on, like, the fundamentals and the philosophy part at the beginning. Like, covers are elbows and elbows are covers, right? Like, that's a famous phrase that Brian uses when he's teaching elbows in Muay Thai, and that is a really fucking good tool if you're throwing elbows in a fight, right? Like, to know that you're covered when you throw this. Okay, cool. And it gives me, now I have... getting back into the philosophy part of things, like, all right, I have my kicks or my long range weapons, my knees or my medium range weapons, then I have my punches that follow that, and then I have my elbows that are in close, and my my knife fighting. Like,
you have
that's
two knives, cut the man.
Exactly. And I think the philosophy of knowing why I'm doing that is really helpful to me, because then it makes me kind of hone in on why I would want to do it correctly.
I love the why, because that literally is one of the reasons I said, Brian, you're my favorite, like, the best martial artist I know, because I can, maybe if I had like something that Brian's admitted, like Charlie Minkin and Bren Lowry, if you are ever down here, come to the Sanctuary Jiu-Jitsu. The level of grappling these people have is insane. But the reason I really liked Brian was because while you may not be able to get in the minute details of grappling, I can bring you any move, wrestling, kickboxing, anything, and you can help me break it down why this would work and why it wouldn't, or where it would go.
Yes.
Like, especially coming from
Time and a place.
Taekwondo background, that is where like a lot of people poo-poo it because don't get me wrong, there's a ton to poo-poo about Taekwondo.
Yeah, but there's a ton not to also.
Exactly. Like the biggest one is those turning back kicks,
I was just
especially
about to
after
say it, right?
those turning back kicks, especially after like the Brian Scott special, which is my favorite combo, is front kick 1-2 round.
Yep.
Once you can, and this is why this is the fundamentals. Once you learn the fundamentals of, oh, this person's moving this way, oh, I step here and land this kick. Those are like 3 fundamentals built on top, and then when you land that kick, it's what happened with fucking John Jones and Stipe. Like that, literally, I was asking Brian about that kick that day. He was on the podcast, and we watched that fight, and I don't know if he told you, I'm like, Brian, John Jones did your kick.
Yeah, dude. Corral the man, I think he says, or like control the man, like keep him in this fucking funnel, basically, the fatal funnel.
But the big one with that for me was in Taekwondo, they kind of have you stay on that one line, and it's kind of like that big elastic kick, which doesn't really work. Brian really told me, and I know this is details, but I love it. He's like, when you throw that kick, if you step off the line, you land your kick with your leg in like a right angle, but you don't really have to aim it then. It's not as much as, it kind of lands
for you.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if the guy is bigger than you, his stomach is just right there. And that seeing how, especially when John landed that kick, you saw it. The kick literally landed with his. It wasn't. It was kind of extended, but and you'd probably know the physics better than me. I really do visualizing in your head. And Max Medorsky told me this about a round kick. He says, "I'm not looking to shove my foot in your face. I am looking to shove my hip in your face."
Yeah.
And once I was able to see, like, visualize your plate hip going into somebody's face, that was so much more helpful because the difference, like a Taekwondo round kick and like point fighting, it doesn't, and correct me, the physics of that, you're not bringing all that mass that's on the ground and that, up at once. I view it as like, You're turning over the parabola too early. You want to throw your hip over right at the tip of the parabola where the force is probably the greatest.
So it's kind of like conservation of like angular momentum, basically, right? Is that like if you ever see like when someone has like a bicycle wheel or something like that, and they like it's like hanging from a string, right? And it's like almost like an ab wheel. It's got 2 handles and then like a bike wheel, and if they like spin the bike wheel. You'll see that like the wheel will stay upright rather than like falling.
So like say that one more time.
So, oh man, this is confusing.
No, just like you did, just like you said it. So if you spin the bike wheel.
Yeah. So if I spin the bike wheel, right, conservation of angular momentum will keep that thing up because it doesn't want to like wobble and get out of its like rotation, and then if it's like orbiting around something else, it'll transfer that motion. So like if she's sitting on a chair that also rotates and then like picks up the bicycle wheel, like if she holds the bicycle wheel, she'll start spinning, right? Because that momentum has to go somewhere.
And so it's transferred to her.
Yes. And so like also when things are more compact, they'll spin faster versus when they're spread out.
Which is just because the force is spread over a larger area versus coming
Yeah, the center
together.
of mass is a little more,
Okay.
your moment of inertia is literally in a more like a dense region.
Okay,
and
that makes sense.
So that's probably why, like, if you flail the foot out early, it's not going to hit with the same amount of force. You're not going to generate the same amount of torque. Like same amount of momentum will not be there as when you stay tight and then go, right? Like it's like a ballerina, like when they go up for, like in figure skating, or I should say figure skating, not ballerina, when they go up for like spins and stuff like that. If they're spinning on the ice and you notice that like if they put their foot out, they'll start to spin slower. Versus when they bring it in, they start to spin faster, and that's conservation of angular momentum.
Oh, because it just goes outward. That makes sense. Because to me, it was always like I remember when throwing a leg kick. If you like throw your hip over too early, it's like whatever. You throw it over at that right moment. It's like the difference between getting hit with like a twig and a fucking metal pipe. Yeah.
Truly.
And that, those little things like that, like that's what I mean. I've been throwing round kicks since I was a kid, and only it's always getting better with those little bit of things and being able to picture, like, I picture a kick as like there's gravity's pulling on my body, and I want to basically take that force, and instead of, I want to transfer it to somebody else, and learning how to do that properly, like with a teep kick where you put your body back to throw it forward. I mean, it's so fascinating how that's where, like, this is an art. It's not just this like martial. It is. I love Joe Rogan's quote of MMA is high level problem solving with dire physical consequences.
Yeah, truly, dude.
It truly is.
It's exactly what it is. And I've heard there's like one comedian that I enjoy, Sam Hyde, and he's big on martial arts. And I see where he's coming from in this argument about boxing is a little bit more pure than something like MMA. Because it's one thing where, like, you have to get so fucking good at the rules of this game, basically.
Specialist versus generalist, just so we're talking.
It's exactly. But I do think that, where he goes wrong in that is that, like, people actually can be that level of proficient in something like MMA, which is a different thing, but there's still those masterful technicians, right? Like George St. Pierre and, like, fucking
Alex Pereira,
Topuria, Pereira, maybe
much
a
more,
little less skills in grappling, right? But like,
I was talking more of like an example.
And I'm
of
talking about like the dude,
specialist.
like Demetrius, Mighty Mouse Johnson is probably the best example. Like of a complete mixed martial artist, who,
Alexander
like,
Volkanovski,
exactly, who can like do all of these things at the highest level.
Islam Makhachev,
yes, right? Like Khabib towards the end, like he started off and his striking wasn't as high, and then like he got so much fucking better.
But what was so interesting about his striking and it's why I think it's so beautiful is like it's like a video game character where you can put in stats anywhere.
Yeah.
And Khabib started really high.
You ever played D&D?
Oh yeah.
So when you're making a class or a character or whatever like that, and you have like X amount of skill points or whatever it is that you can put into these 6 different categories, and that'll like determine what you're going to be good at in the game, basically.
Exactly.
Like if it's intelligence or wisdom or constitution.
In real life, I think Khabib is a great example where it's so beautiful because his skills in striking developed on top of his grappling. So
he had a 99 overall on grappling, and then he started out at like a 50 on striking, but then he built it up to like a 78 on striking, maybe like an 88 on striking.
And it integrated with his grappling where like his 1-2 where he would transfer into a fucking takedown was the
that
most
low single into like the blast double or something like that. And his chain wrestling, the way he can just like keep it going and stuff like that, to shoot a takedown and then not let you back up, or when you do get back up, to then shoot again immediately and fucking secure that shit. And he just knows how to fight the wrists and how to like break your posture and how to make you
carry. The way he made people carry his weight, I haven't anyone. I'm not even
Cormier
Islam.
maybe like similarly like did it, and like I guess someone like Cejudo wasn't really fighting at heavy enough weights, I think, to like really make you carry their weight like that, but even then, like, he was more of a just get you to the ground to try to beat you up. Same with Cormier. But, like, yeah, Khabib was like, no, we're going to live here, man. We're going to stay here, and, like, putting the fucking zipper down on you like that sucks. But I know.
It's so interesting. And, I mean, one of the things I love about the Dagestanis is it's literally the discipline. It's that discipline, that Islamic culture that's surrounded with that. I lived with an amazing roommate who's from Guinea, who is he was Muslim, and he prays Mecca 5 times a day. This brilliant dude, and I always admired how that discipline from his faith transferred to everything he did, and you see it with him. I love. There's some fighters who, like, I sometimes separate a fighter from who they are, but I love when I love their amazing person, and I love the Dagestanis because they're honorable. Like, I want to be like you. I want to have that nobility you have. When I see Khabib talk about things, the way they talks about his mother, his father, his family, the people he trains with, I love it. One of the things an example was Sugar Sean versus Aljamain Sterling. Like, there was so much shit talking, but like it always felt. And I get it. They're trying to sell the fight. Like, no knock on them. I get you're trying to make tickets, make more money. But I love where after the fight, like you could tell immediately, you're like, oh, this was all bullshit. Like they both obviously had a lot of respect for each other as fighters. I love that. I love when fighters have that like love between them, where they come into the fight and then it comes out with a friendship.
I think Dubronx is like one of the big ones on that. Charles Oliveira is just, he's like one of the most humble, respectful dudes of all time, and he's just a fucking killer, like, and I think that.
I think it was Joe who said you cannot, people at the highest level of MMA, they're almost always the coolest, and they're people
great dudes.
Yeah, he said, and it was
generally,
I thought it was so interesting that like that meanness, it'll get you really far, but it won't make you the best ever.
No, and I don't know what does make you the best ever. Definitely drive, and definitely the almost like a lust for competition in a way. But it's also like they're competing with themselves. They want to show up and show. I learned this skill. Francis Ngannou coming back in that second Stipe fight, like, that was fucking nutty, man. To see him wrestle like that was just like, holy shit, dude.
It was so interesting to see. You mean the second Stipe or the second, what's his face?
He's gone.
Like that.
Both of them, right? Like where he just out wrestled, and I was just like, who the fuck saw Francis Ngannou going and being like, I'm gonna go train my fucking wrestling out the wazoo.
And it was so interesting. I mean, a lot of like the simple, it was fundamentals. Like that's how he beat Cyril Gane. Like he lost those first 2-round kickboxing. He's like, okay, I'm just going to hold you to the ground.
Yep.
And even Brian was showing me, I mean, he was just doing simple things. We're keeping his leg out or keeping his arm in a certain position. And so you just can't stand up unless you get through that. And I understand casual fans find that boring. I love that.
I don't mind at all.
I don't either. Cause to me,
I think
MMA
people are
is the
learning
best.
too. There's no sport like it.
It's 4 sports in one.
Yeah, there's no sport like it, and I think it's hands down the most exciting thing to watch, and especially, I think watching it with people who understand what's going on and can give you that color commentary that like Joe Rogan is doing for the UFC. Like when he's not there, if I have friends that want to sit down and watch, sometimes they'll be like, why are they doing that? And I'm like, oh, well, let me explain it to you. Like, let me actually explain that. Like, wait, oh, shit, oh, fuck. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden they see what's unfurling in front of them, and they're like, oh, shit, oh, shit. And then you're starting to see that, like, crowds are starting to do it. Like, it used to be back in the, I'm going back, like, maybe a decade or so, but, like, if they weren't fucking kickboxing in the center of the fucking ring, most people were going to be like, all right, what are we doing here? Like, okay, come on, boo, like, let's go throw. And now you'll see people get into jiu-jitsu transitions and fucking, like, ground fighting and stuff, and people will be, like, silent, like, bated breath, like, oh, shit, okay. And then I can hear it now in the crowd's reactions that, like, they see when a submission's about to be set up, like a Darce choke or a fucking anaconda, where, like, no one knew what the fuck that was, like, 15 years ago that was just watching the shit. They're like, I don't know, they did that one. Unless you were doing jiu-jitsu yourself and, like, that was why you were into this, like, no one knew what the fuck that was. Now people are like, oh, fuck, yo, he's setting up a Darce. Yo, look, oh, shit.
Yeah.
And, like, they know it. Just like the casuals are even becoming more
informed.
Yeah.
I went to the last year. It was actually the night Trump got shot. I was the UFC in Denver. And it was annoying because the first UFC was in Denver, and it came back like 10 years ago. And I think after that night, I mean, Denver was an amazing crowd. And it was awesome because last minute, I think almost every single fight was rearranged. There was not a single fight there. And it was phenomenal. Every fight was amazing. And I was telling my brother.
Is that Magny versus...
It was Rose. It was Thug Rose versus... Oh, I can't remember who she fought.
Did Neil Magny fight Pratis that night?
Oh, God.
I can't remember if that might have been at the Apex.
I don't think so. It was a hot girl fight night.
Yeah.
I would say like some ton of respect, but a lot of female fighters aren't the best looking girls ever. I'm like, to see this live, I'm like, these women are gorgeous. Let's watch them cave each other's skulls in. It was so much fun. The only thing is, I disagree with the UFC crowd more often than almost any other sports. Still loved it, and. It was exhilarating to see it like in person.
Yeah, live fights are really fucking fun. And even if you're not a huge fight fan, that's a really good way to get into it because like even when Sparta puts on stuff here, in Colorado or LFA or something like that, man, there are some absolute killers out there. And like a lot of people don't know this, but Colorado is like a mecca of martial arts, and in specific mixed martial arts. Like there are
I was talking
some
to Brian about
legendary
this.
training people out here. Like, you know, I got to learn from Brian Scott. I got to learn from Dwayne Ludwig. I got to learn from Trevor Whitman and Boss Rutan. Like, these are fucking. If you know martial arts, you know these fucking names, man. These people
I got to
are
meet
killers.
Bob Bass. I
Yeah,
remember,
Bob fucking Bass, man.
dude.
Like,
I remember I was at the urinal and I was taking a
Higa Machado's first American black belt, right?
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
one of the Dirty Dozen, like one
Yeah.
of the first American black belts ever. I'm taking a at the urinal, and he comes up to me and just says like the most like something a bro would say
Yeah.
to you when you're taking a piss, and I'm like, this is the. And I remember we were at like
It's a
Fight to Win.
60-year-old like California kid, fucking dude who was is 5'8", but he's just
No. He's like 5'5".
Yeah.
He's tiny. And I remember we were at Fight to Win in at Denver, and he's in the corner, and like no one knows who he is. And if they did, it'd be like if Peyton Manning was like
Bro.
fucking at your corner coaching your kid, and you're like, what the fuck?
holy shit. What are you doing here?
And just the cool. I mean, martial arts is a big, small world, and that's like one of my goals with the podcast was to bridge the comedic world and martial arts world.
Yeah, it's really cool too. Like, you know, I think there's something around 100 to 150 million like worldwide practitioners of martial arts, and once you really start to like, you know, if you commit yourself to this passion, whatever martial art it is that you enjoy, you'll notice that like everyone you meet is always like a few degrees of separation away from someone else that's like famous in the fucking, you know, whatever it is that you're into. And but yeah, it's awesome because then you go somewhere, you know, like when I go back to Jersey and I go to the gym and the UFC gym and people see me, you know, throwing a combo, then they want to come over and know who I learned that from, and then I tell them, and then they know who they learned their thing from, and then somehow these two dudes knew each other back in the day and they trained at this place and they were in Thailand together at this spot, or they were, you know, in the Netherlands like doing Dutch kickboxing with this guy, like fucking. It's always like a few degrees of separation, which is so fucking cool. And it's like that a lot in like special operations community, you know, like everyone kind of knows everyone because it's such a small
really?
community, right? Like, you know, even Army and Navy dudes will know each other, just like, you know, even like the Green Beret dudes will know some of the SEAL dudes, will know some of the fucking Delta dudes.
I got to go
like that.
train downstairs when I was in Austin. I trained at Gracie Humaita, where
Yeah.
Tim Kennedy trains, which was
Sick.
You know, like I read his book on the way down, and it was amazing. I have to pee so bad.
So do I, bro.
Let's dude. This was so much fucking fun.
Yes, man. Thank you for having me.
Dude, I'm gonna have you fucking back. We
Please.
can go on forever. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great.
Peace.